All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have with me Wendy Verwey, and Wendy is a life and money strategist. And I just think your story is so interesting. I absolutely love it. So you were able to retire at 41, which is mostly unheard of unless people come into a lot of money, which is not really what you did. You were just super good with your money and found out how to actually get to that point. So we're going to talk about that and a bunch of other things in terms of, really looking at your finances and how you can kind of, as the listener, structure things and look at this so that you really can have that freedom that I think that we all come into online business looking for. So, Wendy, introduce yourself.
Hi, Tara. So good to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Wendy Verwey, and I'm in a small town in Alberta, Canada. I did not come from money. I didn't inherit anything. I didn't win the lottery. None of that. I actually didn't know anything about money until my late 30s. So when I say, if I can do it, so can you. There's a lot of things that we all have within our own control that we don't realize that we have control
Mhm.
over. So I love to talk about all of that stuff. A little bit about my backstory. So I was a corporate employee for many years and, kind of living that life, doing all the things you're supposed to do to be a successful human being. Did all the right things, got married, had the kids, had the job, had the house, the dog, all of the things. And then the bottom dropped out completely when I was about 38. And my husband left, and then my dad died, and then my father-in-law died, and then my dog died. And it
Yeah.
was kind of a full-on country song, is what
Yeah.
I call it.
Yeah.
Was kind of what my life had become. And I was in this state where I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to just wait for more bad stuff to keep happening to me. I wanted to take control of my life. And,
Mhm.
at that point, every man that I'd ever loved was gone
Yeah.
from my life. So I'm like, well, he's not going to save me. Prince Charming's not coming around the corner and going to take care of everything. I have to save me. And I was a single mom to two little kids, and I wanted to give them a good example of not just what women can do, what moms can do, what people can do. I didn't want them to grow up with the image of just me being angry all the time and
Mhm.
frustrated and stressed and all of those things. So I started with my money because I thought, well, numbers don't really lie.
Yeah.
I can't lie to myself through numbers. There's not like body dysmorphia when it comes to your budget
Yeah.
or your bank accounts.
Yeah. It's pretty black and white. It's kind of,
Right?
it is what it is.
Exactly. So I thought, well, let's start there because initially when my husband left, my initial thought was, okay, I'm now a single mother. And just that label or that title
Mhm.
felt very, very heavy.
Yeah.
So, no, I know Tara. I
Yeah.
don't know about any of
I'm
your other
very familiar.
listeners.
Yeah.
But, it felt like this whole stigma and this new
Mhm.
role that I had to live where, my kids were going to be dirty all the time. We'd live in some like high-rise tenement house, like in the musical Annie was kind of what I was
Yeah.
picturing, right? I'm going to have to take in laundry to
Yeah.
pay my bills and stuff like that. That was the image that I had.
Yeah.
And when I really started looking at things, and one of the things that I tell people all the time is really like, figure out what's your very worst case scenario. And
Mhm.
that was it for me, right? I
Yeah.
was, destitute. My kids would be hungry. We would be stuck in this perpetual poverty cycle, all of that. That was kind of my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And once I faced that and understood that, okay, if that happened, I have some plans. I have friends. I could sleep on a couch
Yeah.
for a little while. I could, sell some of my things. I could, um, you know, start a business. I could get a job. I could, do all of these things. And at the time, I mean, I had a good corporate job. I had, support. I built a community around me, all of that kind of stuff. So just accepting what the very worst case scenario was
Yeah.
meant that I now had an opportunity to improve upon it, right? So
Exactly.
anything
Yeah.
was going to be better than that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I started. And I looked at, okay, what do I actually want my life to feel like? Because I
Mhm.
didn't want it to feel like that. I didn't want to feel stressed. I didn't want to have, everything feeling like an overwhelming responsibility. I wanted
Mhm.
peace. I wanted simplicity. I wanted
Yeah.
quiet. I
Yep.
wanted to just enjoy the moments. Um, and so I really started looking at, first of all, how I was spending my money, but then I got into how am I spending my time? How am I
Mhm.
spending my energy?
Yeah.
What are the things that I have surrounding me that are causing me more stress? Can I just get rid of them?
Mhm.
Can I walk away from some of this
Yeah.
stuff? And at the time, I had an acreage property that I'd shared with my husband. And when he left, I stayed there for another year on my
Mhm.
own because I didn't feel like I had a choice. I was like, well, this is my house. We're paying the mortgage. This is where my kids
Yeah.
are, all of that kind of stuff. And it took some friends kind of getting me out of my space, first of all, and just saying, just go look around, just see
Yeah.
what else is available. Because I was coming home from work, picking up the kids, and then having to go cut the grass, right? At
Yeah.
this place that it no longer served me. I didn't like it anymore. I didn't want to spend my time and energy doing that when I could have spent time and energy, being with my kids and helping them through this time that they were
Mhm.
just along for the ride on, right? So I did kind of a full Marie Kondo of my life and
Mhm. Yep.
tidied everything up. Like I packed up only the things that I loved and the things that I used often. I packed only those things and I left. And
Yeah.
I found a little duplex property that I was renting. And so if something broke, the landlord would fix it and I didn't have to
Mhm.
pay property taxes and I could walk to
Mhm.
work from my new location so I didn't have to pay for parking and extra insurance for the car and all of that kind of jazz. My kids could take the school bus and they were like the first pickup, which was great
Mhm.
because that counted to me as um, before school care. So,
Yeah.
right. So I didn't have to like pay somebody to watch them so that I could
Mhm.
get to my job. I had worked everything out so that I could be as present as I wanted to be.
Yeah.
I didn't have to come home and take care of a whole bunch of stuff because we didn't have a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
We lived down the street from a park. So I told the kids, let's go play at the park. Like we don't have to cut the grass. We don't have to
Yeah.
weed the flower beds or anything. We can just go and show
Mhm.
up and friends will come. So it was really shifting all of our mindsets
Yeah.
into, what do we want life to feel like?
Yeah.
And how can we do that now as we're working toward whatever goal it is that we've got going on?
Yeah. And I think that's so important because I think people get stuck in that you have to do it one way and it has to look one way. And, you don't have other options, but there are always options. You can literally do whatever you want. You can make your life look however you want. Yes, it might take some time to get there, but you don't have to stay stuck in, that one place. You can change things and it doesn't have to look just this one way. There's so many options available to you. And I find it really interesting because I know like I've gone through this myself and like I've changed so many times what I've done in my life and where we're living and different things and it's because I always keep an open mind of like there's so many possibilities. You get to choose what this looks like.
Yeah.
So like choose it for you. Like you get to do this.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, once I kind of moved to this new place, that freed up so much time
Hmm.
for me. It freed up a lot of money because I wasn't
Yeah.
paying for daycare. I wasn't paying for, all of these other things that I had to in the past. And then I learned how to invest. I
Yeah.
got curious about what do I need to know in order to take control of my money, right?
Yeah.
And so I started taking some courses and talking to people, and I worked with a
Hmm.
money coach to just kind of align things so that it was one less thing to worry about,
Yeah.
you know? And the money coach that I worked with, she was fantastic, and she 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 asked, one of her first questions was, "What are your fears?" And so I told her the whole Annie story.
Hmm.
And after she had a look at my number, she's like, that's never going to be you."
Yeah,
And I'm
you're
like,
okay.
"Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, okay, what can we do then?"
Yeah.
Right? And I just didn't want to have to stress about it. So we set up systems to
Hmm.
make things easy, right? So that I knew where my income was coming from, when
Yeah.
it was coming. I knew where and when it was going out. I knew exactly what I was spending things on. It wasn't
Hmm.
just, show up at the end of the month and there's no money left and I have no
Yeah.
idea what happened. Um, I'm a big champion of doing the really boring things to have a sexy life. And that is one of the boring things, right?
Yep.
Figuring
Yep.
out all of this stuff. And for
Yep.
me, it started with just tracking my spending so that I
Yep.
could understand, and I know that you talk about this all the time, Tara, with, data, getting some
Hmm.
data together, because
Yep.
then you can make some decisions. You can see what the
Exactly.
picture is and you can make a decision. And so that's what I did with my money. I learned how to invest. I did all of that kind of stuff. And then, once I got kind of to that point where I could sleep at night knowing that my bank account was where I needed it to be, all my bills were paid, all of that kind of stuff, then I started looking at, well, what's next? What else
Hmm.
do I want?
Yeah.
And I kept coming back to, I wanted peace. I wanted, just I wanted to be able to close my door and go on an adventure
Hmm.
whenever, inspiration struck. If it was a nice day, let's just go on a road trip
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? Like I'm a pretty spontaneous person that way, but I was still working this corporate job. And once I kind of got things in line, started learning about investing to make my money start to work for me so that I didn't
Hmm.
work super hard for it, just like you and your systems, getting your,
Yeah.
your website to work for you, getting your sales funnels to work for you so you
Yes.
don't have to be present and doing all the things. That's what I did. And I ended up buying a house that has a rental suite.
Hmm.
And so the rental suite pays for my mortgage and my investments were doing well and all of these things were happening. And I realized I don't actually need this corporate job anymore.
Yeah.
Like I was going there just for fun
Yeah.
because I liked the people and I liked some of the work that I was doing, but I was really just waiting for that trigger to, okay, yeah,
Hmm.
look at
I
me the
think I'm
wrong way in a
done.
meeting and I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's so much power in that,
Yeah.
to be able to show up that way. And I mean, I had a great time and I ended up being part of a mass layoff
Hmm.
with the company. Like they were going through a big reorg and lots of people were getting laid off and everybody around me was terrified to lose their job. And I was like, "Oh, pick me, please.
Bye.
I'm
I
ready.
believe. Yeah.
I
I'll
got
go
this."
in.
Right? So
Yeah.
that was kind of how the whole, and I couldn't have predicted, that all of that kind of stuff would happen, especially when I was in, kind of the depths of the country
Hmm.
song. Um, but yeah, I focused on what it was that I wanted. What was that feeling that I
Yeah.
wanted? What did I want my life to feel like? What do I want to share with my kids? What kind of life do I want them to have? All of that just kind of was running in the background, and then
Yeah.
stars sort of aligned to make all that happen. So, yeah, I was retired at 41. Probably not your typical definition of retirement. I wasn't collecting a pension or any of that kind of thing, but I had enough savings,
Hmm.
had enough investments to fund my life.
Yeah.
And I lead a very simple life. So again, it's really about balancing, like what is it that you
Yeah.
want? Want a simple life. I love my simple life.
Yeah.
My expenses are pretty low. I don't do a lot of luxury things, or my idea of luxury is different than,
Yeah.
the Instagram idea of luxury.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So just keeping all those things in mind, and then, as I was doing things and people would see me doing things, they're like, "How are you going kayaking at 10:30 on a Tuesday?" And,
Hmm.
they were just asking me questions like, "How did you do that?" Because everybody else, anybody else that got laid off, they were like stressed and looking for a new job because they had all this debt, they had all these other things that they
Yeah.
needed to pay for. And I didn't have any of that. I didn't have that stress. So I started teaching them.
Hmm.
And I just kind of accidentally fell into entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And- right? So, and I didn't plan on that. Like that was just life kind of evolved that way. And
Hmm.
yeah. So now I get to do all kinds of different things.
Yeah. But it's so interesting how it works out that way. And it's so like it's so nice to hear this versus so many of the things that we hear about online where it's just like, you have to be making millions and, it's so much extravagance and so much to the extreme. And you don't. And you can start this small. Like you don't have to be, even with investing. And I mean, I'm not an investment advisor, but I know for us, like we don't make tons of money right now, but we have also invested and we have, stuff saved for the kids, for our retirement. We have a TFSA, like we're saving all of these things and we don't put tons in every month, but it still builds and it's built up to like quite a bit already. And when you start doing that, it makes a difference.
Totally.
It's
It's
just
planting
getting
those seeds.
started.
Yeah. It's absolutely planting the seeds. I mean, there's so much power in compound interest.
Yeah.
that people don't know about, right? You think you have to
Mhm.
have $1 million. And so when I start working with people, and that's their idea of success. I have to have a
Yeah.
million dollars. I'm like, cool, that's an awesome goal. Where are you starting? Are you starting from $5 or are you starting from $950,000? Because
Yeah.
the strategy to get there is going to be a little bit different depending
Hmm.
on a few factors here, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, starting small it's the only way, right? The whole journey of 1,000 miles starts with one
Yeah.
step. It's true. Like it sounds like a cliche or some platitude, but it's been around for a long time for a reason.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So I want to talk to you about the hourly rate wage thing, the true hourly wage. So tell us about that and what that is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a game changer for me. So if you go to my website, it's wendyverwey.com, and I've got in my tools section, there's a link to your free true hourly wage calculator. And it's a spot where you can put in not just how much you make and, like people are always looking at what's my retirement number and all this kind of stuff. But really, I want to break things down super, super granularly so that you can see where you've got decisions that you can make. And
Mhm.
this was not a concept that I made up. I'm going to give credit to, there's a book called Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin that changed absolutely everything for me. It was written originally in the 70s, I think, but the
Mhm.
principles still apply. And it talks to, really understanding what it is that you have, what you want, why you want the things that you have, all of that kind of stuff. And so really the true hourly wage is, I kind of talk about it as how much does your job cost you to have it, right?
Mhm.
So in my corporate job, let's say, just using some random numbers, I was making $50 an hour in this corporate job. So the true hourly wage calculator looks at how much do I have to spend in not just money, but in time, energy, all of that to make that $50 an hour.
Yeah.
So in that example, I was living at my acreage property. So I had to commute probably 30 minutes a day each way to get to work. So an hour a day. So that was an hour of my time plus the gas, extra insurance for driving to and from work. Um, what else do I have in there? Parking, all of that kind of stuff. So that's just the transportation side of things. Then I looked at, well, I had to have my kids in daycare,
Mhm.
when they were really little. If I didn't have that job, I probably wouldn't have that expense, right? And it's looking
Yeah.
at in that light, right? Like if you didn't have this job, what would you be doing? I had to have a certain standard of clothing. In the
Mhm.
book, they call it costuming. Right? So it's
Yep.
like you've got to put on the costume to fit
Yep.
the part to, work in the corporate office and have the right shoes and all of
Yep.
that. So I would, look at kind of what is a typical day, and I would get up extra early to, do my hair, do my makeup, all of that kind of
Yep.
stuff. Then get the kids up, then take them where they needed to go, then drive into work, park the car, go get the fancy coffee because, that's what you do.
Mhm.
Um, and then go into the office, and I wouldn't have time to drink the coffee because, I'd have to just chug it and get on with my day
Yeah.
because stuff was happening all the time, right? So then I would get into work and I'd be plugging away for a while. Then I'd probably go out for lunch with a coworker and, we'd chit chat about the office gossip or what's going on today, all of that. Do a few more hours of work, and then at the end of the day, be completely fried and not have the mental strength or energy to cook a healthy meal for my kids. So I'd grab some takeout on the way home,
Mm-hmm.
go get the kids, get them sorted, get them fed, get them to bed, then maybe sit down for an hour or two, zone out on Netflix, have a bottle of wine, a box, whatever it is that you need to get through the day, right?
Yeah.
While dreaming about this like fantastic 2 week vacation where that's the period of time where I actually get to live
Yeah.
the life that I want, right? So, and that day was just on repeat.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go through the true hourly wage calculator, it just gives you space to plug in some numbers, right? So not only the dollars that you spend on the gas, on the clothing, on the lunch, on the coffee, but also the time that
Mm-hmm.
you take for yourself, right? Like 2 hours watching Netflix to escape from your life.
Yeah.
If you didn't have that job, would you need that? Right?
Yeah.
Like looking at things in that perspective. So when I did this exercise for myself and, this $50 an hour job sounds great, right? 2000 hours a year, it's 100 grand. Like that's a pretty decent
Yeah.
salary. Should be able to get pretty far in life doing that. But when I input all of these other things, I was making less than $10 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like
Yeah.
this lightning bolt. Like, why am I stressing all of my extra time? I'm stressing on the weekends about, well, this PowerPoint presentation doesn't look just right. And, like, is my boss
Yeah.
going to be mad about this thing, or what's the next thing that's coming up, or getting ready for this meeting and all of that? I'm like, it is not worth it.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. But then the other side of it too was that changed the way I spent money. Because when
Mm-hmm.
I got, the $8 Starbucks coffee and realized it would take almost an hour of my life to make the $8 to
Yeah.
buy that coffee based on my true
Yeah.
hourly wage. I'm like, is this actually worth it? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it is, but
Yeah. Yep.
sometimes it is. But in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't. And it changed everything. It changed the way I looked
Mm.
at my money, changed the way I looked at my energy, my
Yeah.
life, how I was spending my time, all of these sorts of things. And yeah, that I was able to, when you read all these self-help books, it's really easy to just like read it. Oh yeah, yeah, I'm totally going to do that. And then just drop it. And this was one
Mm-hmm.
that I actually went through and did the exercises and, yeah, it changed everything.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Well, because it's so practical. Like it's so,
Yeah,
you
doesn't
can
lie.
see it. Yeah, you can see it in your everyday life, like how that's actually going to change things,
Yeah,
and it's so interesting to look at it that way and like really look at those, little things. They seem so little, but when you break it all down, it's having such a big impact
yeah,
every day.
absolutely.
So, yeah, that's so interesting. Well, we'll link that in the show notes and, on YouTube here so that
Awesome.
people can go through it and check it out because I think that that's really interesting. And just to do kind of like an assessment of like where you're spending your time and what actually is, you know, are you spending it the way that you want to? And looking at, I think, what you really want and are you doing the things to actually get yourself there?
Exactly. Like I look at it a few different ways. First of all, a warning to anybody that does download the calculator. You can't unsee the number. I'm sorry, but it's going to be
Yeah, you can't
shocking.
go back.
But having said that, when you have that number, again, you've looked at what's your worst case scenario. Now you can improve upon it.
Hmm.
So I like to say that, once you look at how much time you're spending getting ready, I stopped wearing makeup to work
Hmm.
because I'm like, well, why? I'm buying all these natural looking products that are more expensive to make me look more like myself. Like,
Yeah.
why am I doing that? So I did some experiments and things with stuff like that, right? I started packing my own lunch instead of buying them and all of those kinds of things. And every time I did something like that, it increased my true hourly wage.
Hmm.
Right? So it was like giving myself a raise without
Yeah.
asking my boss. And that really cemented I do have so much control.
Hmm.
Not about my boss isn't paying me the right amount. And, maybe that's a case sometimes, but in this case, it was, well, this is a fair wage for what it is that I'm doing. I'm choosing to spend it in different ways,
Yeah.
and I don't have to do that. I
Yeah.
can keep more of my money by making some small changes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's so interesting. And especially, I think right now is the time that people probably need to look at that with everything being so expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, and even
So,
in the online world, right? Like looking
mhm,
at online businesses and things like that. I mean, you can do it. It doesn't have to be just for a corporate job. You can look at what
yeah.
am I spending on, additional software or,
Hmm.
paying somebody to do these things or, what are the day-to-day things that I'm doing that are creating this revenue or not?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
can I make some tweaks and cuts,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really, really important because too many people, like we were saying before we started recording, don't look at their, income and expenses and all of that for online business. So tell us about how you have worked with online business owners and looking at this kind of thing. And like, where do you suggest even people start at? Because I know a lot of people just kind of ignore it, but you really can't. If you want to have a business that is profitable and like truly you can actually pay yourself from, you have to look at the numbers. You can't ignore them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, it's about getting over your fear of the numbers,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's so much drama and trauma attached to finances.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I grew up thinking I wasn't smart enough to invest on my own. I wasn't smart enough to figure out how to do any of this kind of stuff. And it was only when I just let go of that and said, says who?
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like who in my life is actually telling me that? I'm like, well, there was no specific person. It was just this collective feeling. I'm like, well, I don't have to listen to that at all. Um,
Yeah.
right. So that's a good one to start with. But even in doing that, like I talk about tracking all the time, and I know that you
Hmm.
talk about tracking as well, right? So just looking at where you're spending your money and
Yeah.
like it doesn't have to be hard. There's all kinds of online apps and things that you can use that are tied to your debit card and your bank accounts and all of that kind of stuff. Um, for me, those did not get granular enough
Hmm.
to get to a point where I could make a decision, right? Like if I went to Costco and saw on my app that, oh, I spent another $300 at Costco, but I don't remember what it was for.
Yeah.
That doesn't help me make any decisions. So I literally went to the dollar store and picked up a little notebook that, it's got the little elastic on it so it can stay shut in my purse. And I just started writing out, this was the expense, this is what came in, and this is what went out
Yeah.
for every single thing. And so, it's like groceries, bank fees, gas,
Yeah.
Netflix, like, it can go down this whole thing. And so I just started writing down every little thing
Yeah.
that I was spending money on. And eventually some categories kind of emerged, right?
Hmm.
And I've got an online course that really walks you through this entire process, right? It talks about all of the tracking. I give you the categories that I use, like you've got my spreadsheets, all of that kind of stuff. That's all on my
Yeah.
website as well. Um, but what that did for me was made me look at everything really, really carefully. So food,
Hmm.
for example, I had 5 different categories for food spending
Yeah.
which, you know, on an app wouldn't have given me that granularity. So I was looking at how much am I spending on groceries
Hmm.
versus, takeout versus dinners out with friends, which was like
Yeah.
a social occasion versus lunch at work
Hmm.
versus, the convenience stuff, a candy bar at the gas station or
Yeah.
Starbucks coffee on the way to work, that kind of stuff. So I had these 5 different categories because then I could make some decisions. If
Yeah.
I looked at, I was spending this much on groceries, but at the end of the day, I was too tired to cook any of them. So I got takeout instead. And then I ended up throwing away a bunch of the groceries because they went bad before I could use them. Like that changes a lot of
Hmm.
things. That's where I can make a decision. I can
Yeah.
buy some more convenient groceries, maybe, you know,
Yeah.
get the pre-cooked rotisserie chicken and just pull it apart. Get the baby carrots that are already cut, like whatever you have to do. Um, but yeah, I started doing things like that and
Hmm.
realizing, okay, I can have that takeout feeling, if I do a bit of meal prep, and that's really what worked for me too.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what I wanted my life to feel like, I not only wanted peace and simplicity, but I wanted to be healthy and I wanted to be
Hmm.
strong and I wanted to be around to play with my kids.
Yeah.
And looking at how much I was spending on takeout food and realizing that didn't feel very good in my body, like that
Hmm.
doesn't align. Let's cut back on some of that and spend more on the good groceries.
Yeah.
Right? So just tracking anything is
Yeah.
really the start, whether it's how much water you're drinking in a day, how much sleep you're getting, how many steps you're doing, if that's what you want to do. Um, how much money you're spending, how many sales calls you're doing, um, how many downloads do you have on your podcast? Like just start
Yeah.
tracking something because that puts some focus on it
Yeah.
and just kind of opens the door to make some changes.
Exactly. Yeah. Because if you don't look at it, you will never know. You'll never
Yeah.
know. And I do the same thing. I have Excel or Google spreadsheets, I guess, where I track everything in both my business and in like our personal finances. And I track it all that way. So then we can see exactly what we are spending on what's coming in, and what we need to adjust and cut out and whatever, move around because it's the only way that you're going to know.
Yeah.
And if you truly want to get to like the time freedom or retire early or whatever it is, that's the only way to get there. It's not just going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all working within systems
Hmm.
right now, right? Whether we formally call them systems or not.
Yeah.
But by not having any data, you can't change the system, right?
Yeah.
Because, and the system might be showing up every day and looking at your stats to see, did I make any money last night? Well, I
Hmm.
was that could be your system.
Yeah.
And if you're not looking at that to say, okay, what do I need to do in order to bring some money while I'm sleeping? That's when you build another system. You build something
Hmm.
complementary, and then you start tracking what's happening with that. And then you
Yeah.
make tweaks, right? You're planting those little tiny seeds that you can then make tweaks to. I
Hmm.
heard a quote somewhere. It's talked about something about like dream with your hands, which kind of resonated for me because it was like, yeah, we can sit back and say, oh yeah, I want this. I want, the million
Yeah.
dollars. I want the $10,000 months. I want this fabulous online business that's going to pay me while I sleep.
Yep.
That's cool if you're dreaming about it, but until you actually do something,
Yeah. It's not going to happen.
it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, I'm a human design junkie. I'm a manifester. So for a manifester to say, you still have to do
Yes.
something, you have to like push the energy in that way.
Yeah.
um, that carries some weight, right? Like
Yeah.
even as a manifestor, I still have to do stuff in order to make
Yep.
things work.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was going to say, yeah, you can't just sit and manifest and expect it to fall from the sky, even though, we are fed that online. It
Yeah.
really doesn't work that way. It really does not.
No,
It's,
no, and you're so right. Like we get sold so many things
yeah.
online, and even the whole idea is that you need $1 million to retire, right? Like I don't have $1 million. And when I like to work with people and find out what are their goals, and
Hmm.
if their goal is $1 million, I'm like, cool. If you
Yeah.
had $1 million today, what would you spend it on?
Yeah.
What would you do with it? What would you do today?
Hmm.
It's just dropped out of the heavens and it's now here.
Hmm.
What changes for you?
Yeah.
Right. And like for me, not much changes because, like we were talking about just before we hit record, I went for a walk in the park. I took my shoes off, was walking in the
Yeah.
grass, just had this lovely grounding moment. That wouldn't change if I had $1 million.
Yeah.
I could do that now.
Yeah.
I dog sit a lot because I love dogs. I don't, since my dog passed away in the country song year, I didn't want to have a full-time dog. I love
Hmm.
them dearly, but I didn't want the stress and the responsibility. I was simplifying, but I
Yeah.
love the energy of dogs. So we have dogs come and stay with us, and I get to be like a dog grandma and then send them home.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
only when I want to, want to have them around. My kids love it because they love dogs and we get to, interact with all different ones. Um, that wouldn't change. I would still probably
No.
do that because I love dogs, but I don't want to have a full-time dog.
Yeah. And you don't need $1 million to do that.
No, I walked to the library today to pick up a book that I wanted to read. I had it on hold for, I just went online and searched for whatever book, and like after,
Hmm.
I don't know, a few weeks or something, it was, oh, this book's available. Cool. I walked to the library to go get the book. It's not because I can't afford to buy a book. I don't want to,
Yeah.
because I don't want to store it in my house and have to move it from place to place to place.
Yeah.
I just want to read it and then send it home. Like none of that changes based on how much money I have. If I had $1 million in the bank, none of that would change. Like I'm
Hmm.
living the life right now that I want,
Yeah.
and everybody else can too.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that because I talk about this too, and it truly is defining what life you want, not looking at what everyone else
Yeah.
wants. It's what do you want? Because then you can see, okay, so what do you need to do to get there? Or what can you do now to make it happen?
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
there's probably things that you can change right now to incorporate some of that and then start taking the steps to make your like dream life, whatever that looks like, actually happen.
Yeah. And it's not about making a bunch of to-do lists and,
No.
adding more things to your plate. It's really about being mindful, being where you're
Yeah.
at, right? Like during the whole country song year, I was grieving and, stressed and dealing with lawyers and, all
Mhm.
of the things were happening all at once. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm not feeling enough joy in my life. So that's it. I'm going to put that on the list. Every day, I'm going to create some joy,
Yeah. Joy. Check it off.
right?
Yeah.
So I had it in mind. I'm like, this is what's happening. And that only lasted a day or two
Yeah.
when I realized, okay, that's just adding another thing to my overwhelming list.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change the vocab a little bit. And instead of creating joy, I'm just going to notice joy every day.
Hmm.
And that changed everything. Again, there's so many little things that change everything. And so noticing joy for me was drinking a cold glass of water and feeling it, go down my
Yeah.
throat into my belly. It was petting a dog. It was
Hmm.
smelling that first hint of lilacs when they come out in the spring.
Yeah.
Um, that was just noticing joy, right? And
Hmm.
I don't need any money to do that.
Yeah.
None of us do.
Yeah.
Right? So these are kind of the little tiny pieces that you can just start to implement. And again, don't make it a to-do list item, but just start to notice.
Yeah.
Notice the joy. Notice when you're getting stressed about something. Notice how it feels when you're spending money. Notice how
Hmm.
it feels when you're, you know, paying somebody for a job well done. Um, Notice how you feel when the money comes into you,
Yeah.
right? There's no judgment, there's no shame, there's no blame, there's no good or bad. It's just notice what that feels like. And then when it feels really good to you, figure out how can you start to recreate that more and more often.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's so good. So, where can people connect with you and find all of the things and all of it?
Yeah, so I'm online. I'm on wendyverwey.com is my website. So I've got all my tools, my online courses, all of that is there. You can catch me on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I'm also the host of the Fire Yourself First podcast, and Tara
Mhm.
was recently a guest. So check out her episode. We talked all about systems and how they make life so much
Yes.
easier. Yeah, but yeah, I'm around. I'm here for it, and yeah, I'd love it for anybody to come and find me, ask some questions. Let's see what we,
Amazing. All
yeah.
right. Well, I'm sure that they will. And we will link all of the things in the show notes and on YouTube. So thank you very much for joining me today. This was great.
Thanks, Tara.
All right. And if you are on YouTube, I would so appreciate if you would like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.